people give to people. People don't give to websites. They don't give to email campaigns. They don't give to direct mail campaigns. People give to people. And what we've found through our research is the more that you can humanize your communications, the more that you can actually foster like genuine relational, conversational type of communication, the more effective your results are.
You're listening to Relish This, the Purpose Marketing Podcast. Here's your host, Stu Swineford.
Hey everybody, Stu here, and I have a really great episode of Relish This for you today. My guest was Tim Kachuriak, and he is the Chief Innovation and Optimization Officer at Next After, which is a really cool organization that focuses on nonprofit donation optimization. And they do such amazing work working with nonprofits across the spectrum to really help them figure out how to improve and optimize their donation systems. So this episode is jam-packed with great information, actionable stuff. I think you're going to love it. We talked a lot about email automation and how to make your emails land in the inbox, how to improve your value proposition. This is a great episode. I'm excited for you to be able to listen to it, and here you go. Tim, thanks for being on the show today.
Stu, thanks for having me.
Well, it's very much my pleasure. I am excited for our conversation today because you are an expert in helping nonprofits figure out how to increase their donations.
Well, an expert is such an ugly word, but if you insist on using it, that's okay.
And your company is called Next After, is that correct?
That is correct.
Out of the Plano, Texas area?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on. You guys got some snow recently, I believe.
If you want to call it that. Yeah, we had a slight little dusting about a week or so ago, but it doesn't last long here in Texas.
No, not at all. I grew up in Oklahoma City, and I am very well aware of how just a slight dusting can bring an entire city to its knees. So I'm assuming that's kind of the action there in Plano as well.
Yeah, actually, funny story. Like the biggest storm that we had. So I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and lifelong Pittsburgh Steelers fan. And they were in the Super Bowl, which was being hosted in Dallas, and I think it was 2009 or 2010.
Okay.
And the week of the Super Bowl, we had this like crazy storm. I mean, like 1.5 feet of snow and ice, and everything was completely shut down. So it was kind of a bummer because, they brought the whole Super Bowl experience to Dallas, and my team in the big game. And of course, I couldn't go. So just thinking, Super Bowl is next week. So I just remember that every year around this time, just like crazy.
Oh yeah. That's a lot of snow for that area for sure.
Right.
Well, I remember the Cowboys Steelers rivalry back in the 70s, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I don't really do football a whole lot anymore, but I remember as a kid being very excited. I think I was a Cowboys fan until I was a Broncos fan. And the Steelers were always up there doing their Steeler thing, which made everyone in the general area grumpy.
That's right. Well, we didn't come here to talk about football, so
no, we did not. But it's good to have some commonality there and some interesting stories for sure. So tell me a little bit about what you do at Next After to help nonprofits out.
Sure. So Next After is really set up to be three things. So we're a fundraising research lab, we're a consultancy, and we're a training institute. And if it's okay, I can explain the three different pieces and kind of how they fit together to help nonprofits raise more money.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So starting with the fundraising research lab, we focus on doing two types of research. The first type is what I refer to more as forensic research, where we're going out and we're analyzing large amounts of data across the nonprofit sector. And what we're looking for in the data is patterns that lead to opportunities to really unlock greater digital fundraising performance. So we're hyper focused around the digital channel. We, like many people, believe it's the future, but it's still an underdeveloped opportunity for most organizations. Now, the challenge we've run into with a lot of our research is that the kind of data we're most interested in analyzing either doesn't exist or it's not readily accessible.
Hmm.
Because what we're really most interested in is trying to experience the charity, the nonprofit organization from the donor's point of view. And we found the
Okay.
best way to get that perspective is really just becoming donors ourselves. So basically, what we do about 4 or 5 times a year, we'll launch one of these major mystery donor studies where we'll go out and we'll subscribe to hundreds of different organizations at the same time. We'll monitor everything they send us, every email, every text message, voicemail, boxes and boxes of direct mail stacked to the ceiling, as you might imagine.
Sure. Yep.
And we wade through those pieces of correspondence and we wait for an organization to ask us to make a donation. And when they do that, we respond by giving an online donation as small as $20, as large as $5,000.
Okay.
And then we just continue to monitor what the organizations send us after we've kind of crossed the chasm from being a casual visitor to subscriber to donor. And it's fascinating.
Right.
It's absolutely fascinating. What's always interesting is that when we do one of these studies, I can have two organizations that are very similar in terms of their size, their scope, their area of focus, and yet they've got two radically different communication practices. So when we see that, we say, okay, if organization A is doing one thing and organization B is doing something else, how do we know what works best? So we take a lot of the insights that we glean from the mystery donor studies and we use it to power the other kind of research we do, which is applied research, which basically means we use the web as not just a channel of communication, but as a platform, as a laboratory to run rigorous scientific experiments to try to figure out what works and what doesn't work. So, for example, we might experiment with two different versions of an email or two different landing pages or two different giving experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And then we test that in a real market, situation with real live, potential donors. And then we just monitor to see what works best. And I think to date, we've documented about 2,500 digital fundraising experiments across a whole range of different kinds of nonprofit organizations. And we learned a lot. I mean, the biggest thing that I learned is that my intuition is often wrong, right? Like sometimes like we rely upon our gut to make the right decision. And what we find is things that work are rather unintuitive.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So then we take, what we learn from the experimentation, from the market study stuff we do on the mystery donor side, and we bring it over to the two other parts of our company. One of which is the Next After Institute, which is really about resourcing and training and equipping fundraising people to become more digitally savvy. So we've developed a whole suite of different certification courses. I think we've got 9 different courses now, everything from turning Facebook likes into donors to email fundraising optimization to copywriting, and the list goes on and on. So that's kind of the training, equipping part of our organization. And then we have a consultancy, and I think we work with about 35 larger nonprofit organizations to help engineer into their fundraising programs the things that we find that work continually.
Oh, that sounds like just a fantastic mix of stuff. And I really like the data-driven piece because I think that that's something that that many nonprofits and for-profit businesses, in fact, just miss out on, is this opportunity to really dig into what's really happening to make more informed, more educated decisions.
Yeah. And there, there's a lot of kind of like gurus and like armchair consultants in the space, especially in the digital world, mainly because the barriers to entry are so low, right? I mean, like anybody can start blasting people or posting things online. And so you get a lot of hearsay about what works best. And we're really interested in letting, the donors really educate us about that through their behavior.
Yeah, that's really great. This is kind of falls into the part of our audience engagement cycle that we like to call the inspire phase, which is once you've brought someone into the fold, how do you nurture them to do more and to become a repeat donor or a repeat volunteer, or even escalate to be a super donor or bring their business in as a corporate sponsor. And this is one area where we really do see people drop the ball a ton.
For sure. And I think part of the reason why is because the barriers to entry to digital marketing are so low, we don't treat it with enough respect. We don't spend enough time on the thoughtful planning side of what we should send to who and when. And so, that's kind of where we end up just kind of like blasting people with a bunch of appeals. And then we wonder why our email list lapses, right?
Yeah, it's really funny. That tends to be the go-to, is that, bottom of the funnel, donate now sort of action. And marketing is really all just about relationship building. And if you
100%.
were
Yeah.
to go to your friend and ask them for money every time you saw them, they probably wouldn't be your friend for very, very long. So there's a lot of nuance involved.
No, you're absolutely right. I'm so glad you said that, because like that is actually one of the meta findings from some of our research and testing. And it sounds really simplistic, but it's actually quite profound. And that's that people give to people. People don't give to websites. They don't give to email campaigns. They don't give to direct mail campaigns. People give to people. And what we've found through our research is the more that you can humanize your communications, the more that you can actually foster like genuine relational, conversational type of communication, the more effective your results are.
Yeah, I really love what you're saying there, and it's great that it's backed up by science, and research and data, and that's just fantastic. So, what are the kinds of nonprofits that you work with most effectively?
I mean, we kind of work with organizations across pretty much almost every single industry vertical, whether that be like a health-based nonprofit, mission relief type of organization, faith-based nonprofit organization, educational organization, advocacy organization. So, it's really important to us to start to understand the nuances between the different ways that organizations fundraise and different ways that different types of nonprofits fundraise. And
Hmm.
what we find is that there's a lot of things that can transfer from, one industry sector to another, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great. Is there a target size of nonprofit that does work with you most effectively?
Well, on the consulting side, we're limited in terms of we have to work with pretty large organizations, and when I say
Hmm.
large, like organizations that are a minimum of like maybe $10 million and up in annual revenue.
Okay.
And that's because organizations of that size generally have an existing broad-based fundraising program in place. So it gives us economies of scale to be able to statistically validate the different experiments that we run in partnership with them through our testing work. So it, the challenge to that is, that's only 3.6% of the nonprofit market. So how do we help
Right.
the rest of the organizations? And that's how naturally out of some of our testing and research work flowed the whole training stuff. So we say, look, we're going to go test with the big guys, validate things, statistically valid results, find out what works, and then we'll go roll that out to the rest of the market.
Oh, that's really cool. And what's the investment cost to be part of your kind of certification programs? Is there a range, or is there a monthly fee?
For the training programs, I mean, I think there's a membership program that I think is like maybe $50 a month or something, that you get
Hmm.
access to all of the online courses, or the courses could be bought or purchased individually, and they're available as on demand. And we do workshops. There's a number of different ways to do that, but as little as like $99, somebody could take a full 6 hour training program.
Oh, that sounds like a really amazing value for a nonprofit really kind of struggling with how to put together a plan that's going to be effective.
I mean, we hope so. It's starting to gain in momentum, and we're really excited about some of the results that we're hearing some of our students are sharing after they've implemented some of the things that we teach.
Oh, that's great. So you mentioned earlier that there are some gut check things that you were surprised by. What are some of the things that surprised you the most in terms of things that you thought either were going to work and didn't, or you were convinced were never going to be effective and actually knock it out of the park?
Yeah, I'll give you a really practical example, and this would be something that really all of your listeners could take advantage of and even test themselves. So, if you look at most nonprofit fundraising emails, what you typically find is that the email has got like a lot of HTML. It's highly designed. It's got images. It's got graphics. It's got big clickable buttons. The copy, it sounds like it's written from a professional copywriter, because in many cases, in fact, is. And the problem is when a potential donor sees that in their inbox, all they see is somebody trying to market to them, right? So
Yeah.
their kind of shields go up, right? And what we found is that, going back to people give to people, people don't want to be marketed to. They want to be communicated with. And so one simple thing that we've tested, and we've tested this with dozens of organizations, we've done it in different countries, we've done it in different languages, that when you simply remove all of the marketing veneer, get rid of the images, get rid of the graphics, get rid of the buttons, and even write the copy so it sounds like it's from one human to another human. I mean, we've seen upwards of like 300-400% increase in not clicks, but giving when we take that approach. So it's rather unintuitive because, we would think, the better the design, the more effective, the more images that we can kind of convey what, the problem is or the solution that the donor represents through their gift. But what we find, at least through the email channel, is that that kind of flies in the face of what actually works.
Well, I think that's really an amazing thing to share, because we've seen that too. And we also, it's like, it doesn't pass this sniff test, right?
Mm-hmm.
That people can smell a sale when it's happening. And for all intents and purposes, a donation request is really just an ask for a sale in a lot of respects.
That's right.
So, people are pretty wary of that. And yeah, I can see how just stripping all of that out makes it more authentic. I've found that a lot of times I'll strip out even my signature line from emails if I really just want to get down to the nitty gritty and find out kind of what's going on with someone. I really take the time to strip everything out so that it just does come across as just a genuine connection kind of opportunity.
That's right. And we've even tested like another kind of like quick tip for listeners. When it comes to the message envelope, so in the email, the message envelope is the to line, the from line, and the subject line.
Mm-hmm.
And then the preview text also is typically included there as well. What we've tested a lot is most organizations will send their email from the organization. It might be like from the Red Cross, right?
Yep.
And what we found is actually testing by sending from a person. So instead of the Red Cross sending from Tim Kachuriak, that the open rates actually increase dramatically. And oftentimes it can affect the click-through rates as well. So that's another example of like kind of humanizing your communications and people give to people. But going back to the email and like kind of like the plain text, there's also a technical reason why that is more effective. And it's for the simple fact that most email service providers like Gmail and Yahoo, they actually have introduced ways to filter promotional emails out of the inbox. They'll either put it in the spam tab or the promotions tab.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you strip away all the HTML and all the images, Google thinks it's just an email from a person to a person, and they have a higher than likely chance of actually inboxing that email as opposed to it going to promotion. So, part of it is kind of like principle based, and the other part is kind of technique. But I mean, who cares? 300-400% increase. Who wouldn't take that?
Yeah, that's amazing. One of the other things that we've been recommending to clients in terms of emails is to get really specific about what the email is in regard to. And instead of sending out one kind of newsletter email a month that has kind of a choose your own adventure and 3 or 4 different things or more to choose from, send out more frequently with a more focused subject matter. And so, you're just basically telling a single story instead of trying to get people's attention. It's hard enough to get their attention anyway, but then to get them to do the thing that you're hoping that they'll do. If you have 5 different asks in there, the likelihood that they're going to pick one or the right one is a lot lower.
Yeah, that's a brilliant approach. We actually have tested that and found that to be much more effective at actually increasing the likelihood that you get people on your email list to engage with your messages. Because if you send just one message once a month with 10 stories or 10 different messages with one story, you have a much higher chance of having that person interact with that. So I like that a lot, Stu.
Yeah, we found it works for us, and it's been working for clients as well. But it seems like more work, but in the end, if it creates better engagement, then it's all worth it.
Yeah, for sure.
What are some other things that nonprofits can do to help fuel that, maybe that repeat donor business that's so desired?
Well, one thing that many organizations really either don't plan for or don't have the bandwidth to be able to execute is sending more cultivation type of content. So what I mean by that is like sending content that's not necessarily asking the person to give again, but maybe reporting back on how their gift was used, maybe thanking them, sharing a story, maybe linking back to a blog post, maybe giving the donor something of value, like an ebook or an online course or something that will kind of connect them more deeply to the work of the organization, as opposed to asking the donor to give them more donations.
I really like those ideas. Those are super in line with what we like to accomplish or have our clients accomplish and our partners. I love the idea of reporting back and sharing how a donor's engagement and their investment has contributed to the good that they were hoping to achieve. I think that's probably a really huge miss for a lot of organizations, in that they ask for help, they get help, but then either the report back feels so impersonal or just doesn't happen on a regular enough basis to keep people engaged.
Can I share an experiment that we performed recently that really proves the value of sending that kind of content and how that actually impacts fundraising?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we were working with this organization, very large national nonprofit organization, and they were sending two fundraising appeals per week. So pretty heavy email sender. So they're sending 2 appeals per week to their donors. And what they had noticed is that their email engagement, the number of people that are opening and clicking and engaging on their emails and then ultimately like responding, was going way, 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 way down. And so they're panicking. And so they came to us and they said, can you help us to fix this problem? Our email engagement has fallen off a cliff. We really don't understand why. So we started to look at data. We took a 6-month snapshot of data. And when we noticed that pattern, that they're sending 2 appeals per week. We said, well, one thing you could do is to decrease your frequency, like send less emails. They said, no, we can't do that. We have these huge revenue targets that we have to hit, and we can't afford to not send those solicitations, because every time we send, it raises more money that gets us closer to our goal. We said, okay, what if you sent more emails? And they said, well, what? And we said, well, instead of sending 2 appeals per week, what if you sent 2 appeals plus a cultivation email a week? And the cultivation email is simply just going to deliver value back to the donor. In some cases, they were giving things like I mentioned, like giving them the donor like an ebook or a tool or a white paper, or they're sharing a story, or even just asking the donor like to respond, say, hey, how can we care for you? And inviting the donor to respond. Well, what happened is when we looked at 6-month snapshot of data, what we noticed is that they were sending at that same volume of email every single month for 6 months. But when we looked at like data, we noticed that there was we were seeing a much higher percentage of people that were deleting the emails than were opening the emails. And what that led to was a decrease in their email inboxing. And what I mean by that is the percentage of emails that were going into the inbox versus the promotion of the spam tab. At the beginning of that 6-month window, they were receiving a 78% weighted inboxing across all the different email service providers. By the end of that 6-month window, because they kept hammering with appeals, 38% inboxing. So then we implemented this whole strategy by sending not less, but more, but adding cultivation. So the donors were receiving every week still the 2 appeals, but they're also receiving a cultivation email. After 6 months, what we found is that email engagement increased by 80%. And it occurred across all of segments: donors, non-donors, lapsed, and current donors. We found that actually like giving to the appeals went up by 26% on average. Not by less, but just by sending, that additional cultivation piece. So it's a great proof point that if we're not kind of pouring that stuff back in, then when we ask, our donors are just not going to respond.
That's just a fantastic insight and data-driven experiment. And I think that anyone listening can take that to heart and really understand that whole relationship building thing again, where if you try to create opportunities for value exchange, the likelihood that people are going to engage and respond and be active is much higher. It's like having a one-way conversation versus actually sitting down and listening and waiting to hear something of interest that you can then build on. It's like the old adage, you're not engaged in a conversation or listening, you're waiting to talk. And if you're always just waiting to talk, people pick up on that.
Right. That's absolutely right.
Are there any other things that you found outside of email, other digital marketing techniques
Sure.
or tactics that
How much
people
time do
can
we have,
employ?
Um,
I'm sure you have
Maybe another
hundreds
tip
of
here.
ideas.
No, here's another really quick tip. And this as it relates to the donation page itself. So what most people think is that, by the time somebody clicks that donate button in the upper right-hand corner, which is where it seems to always be on every nonprofit organization's website, and they
Yep.
get to the donation page, that they're 100% made up their mind, they're going to complete the transaction. And so conventional wisdom is like, let's just get out of their way, right? Don't have a lot of stuff on that page. Like, keep it really, simple to the point, reduce, friction,
Mhm.
as much as possible. But the problem is if you look at the data across the entire nonprofit sector, less than 25% of the people that click the donate button in the upper right-hand corner and get to the donation page actually complete a transaction. Less than 25%.
Okay.
Which means that donor hasn't fully made up their mind yet. So you might say, well, maybe it's because the giving experience is too difficult. There's too much friction, too many different decisions the donor has to make. Yeah, that plays a part. But what we find is that it's not that there's too much there. It's that there's something missing.
Okay.
And what's missing is the value proposition. So
Right.
out of all of our testing, the number one thing that we find that really moves the needle in a significant way is how effectively the organization communicates the value proposition. And to us, the value proposition is how the organization answers this question. If I'm your ideal donor, why should I give to you rather than some other organization or not at all? We have to anticipate that question and appropriately answer it at every stage of the donor journey. So on the donation page, if all I have is a bunch of work for the donor to complete, pick how much you're going to give, fill out your credit card information, give us a bunch of information, decide how you're going to pay, that's just all cost, right? There's no value if you're not having something that's conveying value. So what we've tested, and this is a very, very simple thing every organization can do, is, do a little exercise with your team. Try to answer that question as best you can. Like, why should I give to you rather than some other organization? Not at all. And then write out copy that answers that question. Put it on your donation page and run an A/B split test. And what we find is that can increase donations, again, 2, 3, sometimes 400, 500%.
Wow.
By simply adding more copy that answers the value proposition question at the point where it's needed the most.
Yes, that's really great advice. I know that we have kind of a formula for landing pages where we try to strip out as many distractions as we can.
It's a great strategy, by the way.
And then I think that one of the missing pieces there is the intentionality around the copy to really help answer that question. Where in the past, I know that we've created copy for landing pages that's effective, but I think just having that little slight intentionality shift on what the actual experience that we're trying to engage and the value there, I think that'll take things to the next level.
For sure. And as it relates to the value proposition, this is something we actually studied in great detail. So about, I guess going back about 4 or 5 years now, we did a study called Why Should I Give to You? The Nonprofit Value Proposition Index Study. And in this study, what we did, something very simple. Anybody could do this. We went to 127 different organizations. And we asked them the value proposition question. We asked them across 4 different channels. So we went to their website. we looked for the 1-800 number and we called them on the phone. We said, hey, I was thinking of giving a gift. Can you tell me, why should I give a gift to you rather than some other organization or not at all? And we listened, and we recorded every single phone call, and we transcribed that. Then we sent them an email to their contact us form and said, hey, thinking of giving a gift, why you rather than someone else? We messaged them that question on Facebook.
Right.
And then we looked at what their donation page had to say. What we found, well, first and foremost, we found that nonprofits are bad at getting back to people that are asking donor intent questions. So like 30% of people never got back to our email or our message on social media. So that's first step, is get back to people when they're asking questions about how they can give to you. The second thing we found is that, like, we're speaking with forked tongue, right? We may say one thing on the email thread. We may say something else, like, on the phone call, something completely different on social media. And something completely different is represented on our donation page. So it's a great organizational exercise just to take folks through that process, and maybe contact your own organization, give a donation to your own organization, and make some notes along the way.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. A great insight. I think that comes back down to kind of this idea of values, vision, and mission. And so often, organizations have a pretty good understanding of that, but they haven't done a fantastic job of articulating that to across the spectrum to all of their stakeholders. So that includes, their vendors, their volunteers, their donors, internal staff, board, everybody. And so you get this huge disconnect in terms of what that language is and how to put voice to that, those big goals and what it is that the organization is actually doing. And so, again, I always encourage organizations to go back and really, really dive into values, vision, and mission on a regular basis, and then just hammer that home. Make it so that it's being said so frequently that that people are almost sick of it internally. But that's when you know that you said it enough, really.
Yeah, and one of the things that we found, actually, when we went through that research, is that you're right. Like, I think many nonprofit organizations have a pretty good grasp themselves on what their vision, their mission, their values are. But the problem is that's not a value proposition. What you do is not a value proposition. The value proposition is the reason why the donor would want to give to you, right? So it's, whereas, vision, mission, values, that's like organizational centric type of, content. But the value proposition is donor centric content, right? It has to be framed from the donor's point of view, not from the organization's point of view. And it's hard to do that because, when you work at an organization, or even, me and my organization, we have our blinders on. We can see, like all the detail, and we can see the impact that our organization's having in the field and the valley below, but we can't, our donors can't see that, right? Because they're coming in uninitiated. They're coming in with a very, very, very limited perspective. And so it's hard to develop that empathy for the perspective of the donor, but that's what testing comes in and helps. It helps you to reframe that.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk about that as in terms of the kind of the hero's journey, where everyone has a tendency to try to sell themselves as opposed to trying to position themselves as a guide in this adventure, in this journey that whomever they're speaking with is on. So whether that's a donor or a volunteer or or even a beneficiary. And in the nonprofit world, I think this is even harder because, we're doing this great work and a lot of times we're not doing it for a lot of money. And so it's hard to kind of not have that tendency to talk about all the great things that the organization is doing, but being able to flip that narrative a little bit and put the person that you're talking to in the hero seat can just work wonders in coming up with that value proposition.
That's perfect. That's a perfect illustration. The hero's journey is a perfect illustration of what I'm talking about. I'll give you one more piece as it relates to value proposition if we still have time.
Absolutely.
When we went through that research, what we've kind of discovered is that there's like 4 dimensions of an effective value proposition. There's appeal, exclusivity, credibility, and clarity. So let me explain those 4. So the first dimension of an effective value proposition is appeal. which means people have to like it. They have to want it. They have to see that this is desirable, like this change in the world. It has to be something that, has that appeal, right? That's attractive. It also has to be exclusive, right? Meaning, like, if you're doing something that's very appealing, like, feeding people that are starving. I mean, a lot of people think that that's a wonderful thing to have happen. But if there's so many different organizations that do that, that dilutes the potency of the appeal, right? Do you see what I mean? It kind of acts as like a denominator. So you need to figure out what is the unique thing about your organization, or maybe the unique way that you solve this program that's this problem that's different from other organizations, right? So exclusivity is number 2. The third one is credibility. People have to believe in you. They have to trust the fact that you can actually get it done. They have to trust the fact that your organization is trustworthy of their financial gifts, right?
Right.
And then the final piece is clarity. And this is the hardest one. Like, the bedrock of the entire value proposition rests upon the ability that the donor can understand the value proposition. They can understand with their, perspective why it's appealing and exclusive and unique and credible. So that's kind of like the 4 different dimensions. And, you can experiment with trying to focus on different aspects of that. And we've done a lot of that, and found that, when you work all those things together, it packs a pretty powerful punch.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's people have a tendency to get really wonky when they talk about the things that they do, and that's where that clarity piece comes into play, where just being as simple and concise and don't get too far in the weeds when you're trying to convince people that your organization is the one that they should support.
That's right. And you're right. I mean, we use lots of acronyms. I mean, even on this call, I probably got into the weeds on certain things, and people are like, what the heck is he talking about? Right. But that's, that's our goal, is really just to help people understand a good value proposition fosters a conclusion. It doesn't have to yell from a megaphone. It's a gentle whisper in somebody's ear.
Yeah. 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 I think that really digging into that value proposition and understanding how to frame that into the perspective of the audience that you're trying to hit at that moment. So let's say just your donor, that's hard work.
It is. And it requires us to exercise humility, right? I mean, and that's where testing really comes in, because the neat thing about testing is it enables you to allow your donor to educate you on what messages work and what messages don't, right? So like that's why I love testing so much, is because, when you're a consultant, or, I've been a consultant most of my life, and there's a lot of pressure. I mean, everybody looks at you like you have all the answers, and you don't even have to be a consultant. Maybe you just like lead a certain aspect, like fundraising for your organization. Everyone's looking at you like you have all the answers. Well, deep down inside, we know we don't, right?
Right.
And so when I discovered testing, it was kind of very liberating, because like, I don't have to pretend to have all the answers anymore. I can say, look, let's get our best ideas on the table.
Yeah.
Let's take them to the market, and let's let the donors educate us on what works best.
That's just fantastic advice. In the absence of a lot of statistically significant traffic, for example. So for some of the nonprofits out there who maybe are just getting started or don't have a huge audience base, do you recommend just going back and surveying the people that they can get in touch with? Is that how you would approach that kind of testing platform?
I think, survey work and primary research, it's a great tool. But what we found when we've done a lot of surveys is that often what people say and what they do are 2 very, very different things. Like people might say, hey, I really just want to hear from you once per year. But if you do that and they don't receive that one message that you send, and they forget about you, and then all of a sudden, like, they're completely disconnected from you know what I mean? So it's really difficult sometimes to, make real critical decisions without, having like really good market tested data. And so that's really why I would say, look, rely upon all the testing work that we've done. That's why we're doing all this work, is to try to unlock that stuff and find the things that have worked over and over and over again for many different kinds of organizations, that are universal transferable principles that you can take and put in place to be able to optimize your program.
That's just great to be able to lean back on all of that data that does have significance, even though it may not have always been accomplished on, an organization exactly like yours, but you've done enough of that research that you know that these trends are applicable kind of across the board. So, if you don't have, like I said, that statistically significant amount of traffic to really do a solid A/B test that you can wrap your arms around and really embrace, then yeah, going back to all that bulk of data that you've collected is that's a valuable resource.
It is. And there's some things that, every organization can test. I mean, like even if you have an email list of less than 1,000 subscribers, you could break that in half and do a 50-50 A/B test on like the message sender, for example. Like I suggested, testing sending from a person versus an organization. So, you can go back and try to test some of these things for your own organization. It's where it gets into the donation page. If you don't have enough traffic volume there, it's going to be very, very difficult. But we've created templates based off of all the tests that we've done that you can go download for free. And it points out all of the different elements that could help you to optimize your donation experience.
Well, it's just an amazing resource, and it's fantastic that you've opened this up for really anyone to be able to get into through either, like you said, there might be some free resources there, or just for a very small investment. It sounds like you just have a wealth of information that people can tap into. Where should people go to get in touch or to find more information about what you guys are doing?
Well, probably our website's the best place to go at nextafter.com. And, I'm all over social media. So you can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter at Digital Donor. But yeah, probably the website's a good place to start.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for being on the show, Tim. I really love conversations, but I also love action. And if people were listening to our show today, what would you want them to do after listening to the show? Could be anything.
I would want them to really just embrace the fact that if you work in nonprofit and you work in fundraising, the work that you're doing is very, very important. And what I mean by that is, oftentimes the fundraisers are kind of like, well, your job is to go bring in the money, but like we're doing the real work of the nonprofit organization over here. And I disagree with that sentiment. And the reason why is because every time you're able to get somebody on the other side of the screen to understand and to see the opportunity that they can have to make a difference in somebody else's life by giving a donation that's going to support, some sort of difference they want to see made in the world, that impacts the donor in a very significant way. It takes them out of themselves, out of, being, I guess, sucked into their own kind of, consumerism of just spend their money on themselves, and they're giving to somebody that, or some organization or some cause that's important to them. I think that's a miracle, and it should be celebrated.
Yeah, that's great. We're really all part of this ecosystem, and that ecosystem is part of a bigger ecosystem, et cetera. And so within any given organization, what you're doing and the good work that you're coming in and doing day in and day out, whether that's bookkeeping or hands-on work with beneficiaries, it's all part of that bigger play to really make a difference in the world. And I love that you guys are filling your little niche of that ecosystem as well.
Well, awesome, Stu. I really enjoyed the conversation, and
I did too.
Have me back sometime.
Yeah, I would love that. Thanks a ton, Tim. Talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
Bye. All right, there you have it. Another great episode of Relish This. Thanks for listening. If you would like to learn more about how to apply the audience engagement cycle to expand your organization's mission, there are two things you can do. Right now, you can go to missionuncomfortablebook.com to download a copy of my book. And while you're there, you can get your purpose-driven marketing score to see where you can unearth some gold for your organization. If you'd like to listen to back episodes of the show or sign up to be a guest, go to relishstudio.com/podcast. That's it for this week. I'll be back next week for another great episode of Relish This.